Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's most successful radio talk show host. Welcome to the show, Rafe.
Always a pleasure, Jim.
Well, I knew when they closed the busiest Coast Guard base in Canada in Kitsilano, Vancouver, that something bad would happen. And that closure came, by the way, just a week after an oil tanker hit the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. And I said, you know what we have now if the same thing happens in Vancouver? They have a Zodiac manned by students, but only during the warm months. So we're lucky that the oil spill that happened in Vancouver happened in the springtime. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have the Zodiac. But still, a very sad state of affairs for Canada's busiest harbor.
Well, we don't take it seriously enough by any stretch of the imagination, Jim, and you're quite right. It's Canada's biggest harbor. I think it's still the biggest harbor on the west coast of the Americas too. So it's a very big deal, Vancouver, and you just don't mess around with it. It's structured very well as a port if you've got a small port, but it's since about 1970 or 75, it's sprung out into English Bay, and the majority of the ships are out there now. And if you've got a leak out there, you've got a problem. And I just hate to think of the sort of the amateur hour that's governing it. And as you know, I'm involved in a business with the proposed LNG plant in Squamish, and that poses a whole bunch of new problems with tankers. And you can't get the governments to take you seriously. They just spend all their time listening to the money, and they pay no attention to reality. And it's for a person like me that's lived out here all my life and just love the coast to pieces, to see that sort of attitude coming from Ottawa. But I can't just blame Ottawa. And I look at our own MPs, look at James Moore, and look at John Weston, my MP, and the absolute indifference they have to this thing. It's really terrible.
Is the closure of the Kitts Coast Guard base simply punishment by Stephen Harper for Vancouver failing to vote Conservative?
Well, it could be. I don't know what it is. I wouldn't put that past him. He's that kind of a small man, I think. But, really, when you look back, Jim, going back to 1871, British Columbia has been a pain in the ass to Ottawa, and particularly in things like shipping and salmon and that sort of thing. They don't understand. They don't care to understand. It costs money to understand. So just sort of pretend it's far away. And I don't want to get too far afield here, but this goes to the structure of our system. When you have MPs that are so bound by party discipline that they can't speak out for their own province and their own constituencies without fearing of being turfed out of caucus or never getting promoted, etc., you've got a system that just doesn't work. And that's why we don't have members standing up in Parliament really raising hell. Even Liberals, unless Trudeau tells them it's okay to do it, they don't do it. And same with the NDP. And it's a failing of the system that I've been talking about now for 40 or 50 years, and a lot of other people have picked it up. It just isn't working, and here's a hell of a good example of why it isn't working, or how it isn't working.
Well, a good example, too, of the parliamentary system not working. Over 60% of Canadians did not vote for the Prime Minister, yet he gets a majority government.
Well, that's just the whole system is goofy. Obviously, some sort of proportional representation has to come sometime. It's not perfect. But, we in this country, we have always made perfection the enemy of improvement. And it's so stupid. Yes, we'd have to have a system that's different, even if we went to some of the systems that have been proved much better, such as they have in Germany and New Zealand and places like that. There would be a lot of people bitching about it and saying they don't like it, and that's because we don't really like governments anyway. But, New Zealand is an interesting sort of situation. My father came from New Zealand. I've spent a lot of time down there fly fishing over the years, and I was right through the time they changed their system from the first past to the post to the mixed system they have now. And they screamed blue murder, the old system. Then they put the new system in. Oh, my God, it wasn't working. It was worse than ever, et cetera. And everyone I'd ask, well, would you go back to the old system? Oh, no. We wouldn't do that. So it's just that we don't like to improve things if it isn't absolutely perfect, and it's never going to be. But it's going to be a hell of a lot better. And if I can go to my MP and say, you must speak out for my part of the world, or, you're in deep trouble, Well, that's one thing, but nowadays it doesn't make any difference. If I don't vote conservative, it doesn't matter if John Weston doesn't get in. If the conservatives get in, it's the same thing anyway. So it's just a bad system, and I know it seems like a stretch, but it really isn't. We're seeing what happens right now when we have the Coast Guard issue and so on in English Bay, seeing that nobody from our coast was raising hell in the government, and particularly James Moore. I mean, here's a senior cabinet minister in British Columbia, and he's sort of puffing along in his usual arrogant way and paying absolutely no attention to the realities, not only of that incident, Jim, that's bad enough, but we have the potential of a hell of a lot more to come unless we take care of ourselves.
What does it say about the Harper government that nearly a dozen cabinet ministers have said they're not going to run in the next election, and they have, I think, nearly 20 MPs who have said they're not going to run in the next election? Don't you like to be with a winning team?
Well, I guess that does show that there is a little thought amongst a lot of them that that's not the winning team anymore. But the problem is, Jim, if we toss the rascals out, a new bunch of rascals come in, and it's the same system. And I know what I'm talking about. I've been there. I was in Victoria. It's the same system, and I've seen what happens to backbenchers. Thank God I was never one. They're under enormous pressure to behave themselves at all time. You get this nonsense coming from them. Oh, well, you should see me in caucus. That's where I really raise hell. Well, I've seen them in caucus, and sure, they'll raise hell until the premier or the prime minister walk in the room. Then all of a sudden, they're like little schoolboys caught with their fingers in the jam jar. It's a bad system, and until we understand that, we're going to have these sort of things happen.
I've heard that Harper's right-wing agenda, concentrate on law and order and anti-terrorism, is going to the 30% of Canadians who will vote conservative no matter what, because he knows with them plus a few others, he's going to get back in again.
Well, I think that's obviously what he's trying to do, and it's been a pretty careful laid plan. That and trying to get back some stuff in Quebec with the law and order does a very good job of doing just exactly that. And that's how the system works, and it's appalling when you think about it. The guy that really discovered this, if you think back a little ways, was Jim Coots in the old Trudeau government, and he figured out all you have to do is get a good chunk of Ontario and a piece of Quebec, or vice versa, and you don't have to worry about the rest of the country. And unfortunately, that's right, still right today.
Well, the law and order agenda for the Harper government, the Supreme Court just quashed mandatory sentences for gun possession. What's this going to do to his anti-terrorism law that makes a point of violating the Constitution?
Well, I guess the question is whether we can get it there fast enough, Jim. That C-51 terrorizes me in a way for reasons that haven't been spoken of very much. As you know, I'm an activist, and health permitting, I intend to be out in front of bulldozers and all the rest of it if they get involved in this pipeline or this LNG plant proposed in Squamish. Now, I don't mind taking my lumps and being found in contempt of court and going to jail for a month or whatever it is, and it all fizzle away like it usually does. I don't think I should have to go to jail for protesting, but that I can understand and I can live with. That's the way it's always been. But to suddenly be a terrorist, my God! And that's at the say-so of the RCMP, who, as you and I know, are politicized as hell. So that comes directly from the people that are in charge in Ottawa. We're going to make these people terrorists. Think of the people in Burnaby. Now, the people in Burnaby did one hell of a job on Kinder Morgan. Kinder Morgan's been on his back feet ever since, trying to figure out what the hell to do next. And those people are not terrorists. They're ordinary, everyday citizens like we have, like you and I are, and have kids and grandkids. They're nice, decent people. But under this legislation, at the whim of the RCMP, as instructed by the minister, they could be terrorists. And that's an appalling thing for Canada to be. I just can't believe it.
We'll have more with Rafe Mair right after this.
More and more people are looking to the internet for intelligent, riveting, and thought-provoking interviews. To advertise on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com, call 604-699-8600, 604-699-8600.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Rafe Mair. Rafe, with so many flaws in the system, is there any hope to make sure that environmental concerns in BC are looked after? I mean, we have such a precious resource on the West Coast, beautiful scenery, wildlife, a combination that you don't get to see in the rest of the world that's industrialized. Do you think, does big gray Toronto or dismal Ottawa have any idea what kind of a jewel they have here in the country?
Well, obviously, the people in charge don't, Jim. If I can just tell you very quickly a little something about the proposed Squamish LNG plant. Now, this will give you an idea of what people in this area are up against. And I might tell you, we're up in arms and we're going to win this fight. So don't think we're quitting on them. But this is a couple of things that we're up against. First of all, when this particular company got some PR companies to help them out, the PR companies have got to swear before the commissioner that the LNG, the wood fiber LNG, is a wholly owned company, is not a subsidiary, has nobody to answer to. And the both of them did that. Put it all down on paper, swore their oath to it. In fact, there were absolute lies. This company is owned by a crook in Indonesia, and it's a third down the line of subsidiaries. That's just one idea, one way of doing it, but it gets more subtle than that. The vice president for bullshit, guy named Giraud, wrote a letter or did a column for the North Shore News last week, and in it he talked about the safety of LNG tankers, and he poo-pooed any notion that there could be danger, and he said, in the last 50 years, there have been no accidents on the high seas. Well, who's talking about the high seas? We're talking about Howe Sound, which is, it's too narrow for these ships. We're not talking about the high seas, but that's the kind of stuff that goes on and on and on. They just simply don't tell you the truth. We caught them out big time. I don't know whether you knew about this story, but they've got a shill organization called Resources Work. And they put on a little television thing, and the television lady did this interview with Dr. Hightower in Albuquerque, who's an expert on the matters of tankers and safety and so on. And they had him saying that tankers were perfectly safe in Howe Sound. Well, I looked at that thing, and it's my school eye, and I gave it to Dr. Owen Finn, and he said, there's something wrong with this. I said, yeah, there is. So he said, I'm going to call this Dr. Hightower. So he called Hightower, and he said, I've never been interviewed by a woman in my life. I was interviewed by a man, and I don't remember those questions. I remember some questions. They had done this, and they faked it. I mean, you and I know how you can do that very, very easily. Well, it turned out that Dr. Hightower had any idea where Howe Sound was, much less whether it was safe. And when he was told the measurements of Howe Sound and asked to put it in terms of his own calculations, he said, there's no way in the world you can put tankers in Howe Sound. So this is the kind of stuff that's going on. You have to face it every day. So you have to start cynically with a response to anything that industry or the governments, because they're in each other's pockets, anything they say, you've got to respond by saying bullshit. And 99.9% of the time, you're going to be right.
Well, I was just thinking, Howe Sound has some of the strongest, most continuous winds in the world. That's why it's great for windsurfing. The side of a supertanker is like a giant sail.
Yes.
It's going to push that ship around like it's a cork.
Yeah. Well, let me just give you a very, very quickly give you what the statistics are from the people that I have now put the formula to the United States government, which has accepted it. And I'll very quickly say, almost nowhere in Howe Sound can the ship in mid-channel be more than 1,600 meters from shore. North of Britannia Beach, the sound is only about 2,700 meters wide. The three possible outbound routes from there to the Salish Sea, one east and two west of Bowen, contain another 14 choke points, which means it's too narrow to go. The average width is reduced to just 1,850 meters. So the Sandia formula, which is the one they're accepted of 3,500 meters minimum safety zone, extends more than 2 kilometers beyond the size of all of those channels that they've proposed. Virtually the entire Sea to Sky Highway from Britannia down to Lighthouse Park, and Anvil Island, Boyer Island, Bowen Island, Eastern Gambier, most of Keats and the Paisley Island group, representing thousands of people, are all well within the 3,500 meter zone. So here you have the standard which is set, and I can tell you it's considered very, very conservative by most environmentalists. The standard that's being set and being accepted by the United States, and we're trying to say you could put tankers down this channel. I mean, the whole thing is mad, Jim, and the problem is you have to keep fighting this sort of stuff. The government just poo-poo it, and they use the wrong statistics and so on. You just got to keep on fighting, but it's a tough fight. But I'm off base now a little bit on it, but we're going to win it.
Well, one thing, too, I remember the government ads from Ottawa saying Canada has doubled the penalties for polluting waterways and so on. But then the news comes out that Canada used to have over 3 million protected waterways. We're now below 100.
Yeah.
So what? Does that mean that you can just openly pollute the others?
Right. Well, of course, that's the whole point. They futz around with the statistics so that they make it look like it's a great thing, and in fact it's terrible. It's just like I told you here about the widths. The government will tell you, oh, well, this is a very safe business. This tanker business has had many accidents for 50 years. Well, you say, wait a minute, have you ever had any tankers going down Howe Sound or anything like that narrow? Oh, no, we don't send them down there. That's the answer. And the whole thing is, it gets back to what we were talking about a little while ago. We do not have a kind of government where our representatives could stand up in Parliament and say, Mr. Speaker, you won't believe what wood fiber LNG is saying about Howe Sound. Here's the bullshit that they're giving, and the government is accepting it. We have nobody that can do that. Our MP has not said, in now nearly 8 or 9 years, not said a single solitary critical peep about any government policy in the whole time he's been there.
Well, the poor minor response to a small fuel leak, as it turns out, now we're being told it could be weeks, maybe months before they get it all cleaned up. And this was just a tiny leak of a few thousand gallons.
Oh, imagine if it's substantial. And the thing is, too, Jim, everybody has to think about this. They say, this is perfectly safe. There is nothing that's perfectly safe. That coin is going to come up heads sooner or later. And the more tankers you put through the system, the more likelihood there is of an accident. That's just plain raw mathematics. You learn that about grade 5 in arithmetic. And the governments and the companies are just pretending it isn't so. And, if somebody said to you, let's say 10 years ago, we're going to have a BC ferry just suddenly sink coming down the coast of this British Columbia, the coast they all know so well, etc. You say, go on, what's the matter with you? Well, it's happened. I mean, these things do happen.
Or could you have a $500 million cruise ship hit the rocks?
Exactly. And the one thing you can't calculate in any of these things, too, is human error. You can calculate mathematically what's supposed to happen, but you can't calculate human error, and that's always going to be there. So it's one of those things that we just have to start taking seriously. And as long as we've got nobody will stand up for us in Ottawa, it's very hard to take it seriously. We, in our group, it's a very large group that's dealing with Howe Sound now. We had a protest meeting on April the 1st, and the lady who was putting on thought, well, I wonder whether we should have John Weston and the MLA come to this meeting too, and maybe they want to speak. I said, are you mad? They're the enemy. Well, yeah, they are the enemy, aren't they? Yeah, and if they came, they wouldn't speak. So they said, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we get the NDP guy to come down? What the hell is his name? I'll think of it in a minute. Simons. Nicholas Simons. He'll come down and speak. I said, no, he's an enemy too. The NDP are in favor of these things. So there you are, people like us, hundreds, thousands of us involved now. We're utterly and absolutely unrepresented in the Parliament of Canada and in the legislature of British Columbia.
And of course, the big debate right now is if Elizabeth May, the leader of the Green Party, will be allowed to take part in the debate.
Oh, you can't let her talk. She might talk some common sense and actually have some people support her and actually criticize the Prime Minister if you let that woman talk. No, you got to shut her up. I mean, you're right. She is a very, very good example of how there is no representation for people that want, to see things done, see things preserved. And you're right. A while ago when you talked about people and other parts of Canada. No, they don't. They not only don't know about the beauties of British Columbia, they don't understand how passionately most of us feel about it. Not just people like me that have lived here all our lives. You know, there's nothing so passionate as a convert. And I know I have a lot of good friends that have from Toronto and Quebec and so on that I see socially. They're worse than I am. You know, they really are, and they're more strong environmentalists, and that's not being taken into it. I don't give a damn if people in Ontario don't agree with that point of view. That's got nothing to do with it. What I'm saying is that at least we should have the right to present that point of view in the Parliament of Canada and be heard. We can't even get that.
Rafe, anything else you wanted to throw in on this?
Oh, I don't think you've exhausted me, Jim. You know, I'm supposed to be here an invalid, and you work me out every couple of weeks. Well, of course, you send that fat check every week, so that's always helpful.
Yeah, as much commission as I get on it.
No, it's always good to talk to you. It really is, Jim. I enjoy it very much.
Well, I think it's an important message to get out there.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Because you certainly don't hear the government talk about it.
No, you don't. And it's really, and you know, very quickly before we go, most people, until they really think about it or have it put to them, are believers. They think, oh, we should put Rafe Mair in Parliament because he'd be a good MP. What do you mean a good MP? I go back there and do bloody well what I was told. And every step of the way, I'd read the speeches I was given. I give the press releases I was given. I wouldn't ask the things I wasn't supposed to ask. There is no such thing as a good MP. And that's appalling when you think about it. You know, it really is. These people that we look up to, that we expect to do things for us that are sort of cut above us, but that's not so. It's terrible.
Well, it seems too the Conservative Party has the attitude you can't protect the environment and do good business at the same time when so many experts tell you that is good business.
Oh yeah, that's just nonsense. It really is. We now have corporatization gone wild, and nobody is suggesting that we suddenly sit around and eat beans and chew on grapes all day long and evaluate our belly buttons. No, we all know there has to be industry. We have to work around these things. We all know about the forest industry in British Columbia. We have to make it better. We have to help it. And we have to make sure that we do things like mining and so on. But they have to be consistent with a common sense, decent, long-term approach to the environmental impact they're going to have. That's not so much to ask.
They always talk about the millions each cruise ship brings in when they dock in Vancouver. You ruin the environmental outlook or the view of the city, those ships will stop coming.
Oh, you bet they will. And they do. And you only have to see what happens when there's political trouble somewhere. They don't go there like right now. And they're very sensitive to what they're going to. And you're absolutely right. Vancouver we always are very proud when we hear it's the number 1 or 2 or 3 city in the world and all that sort of stuff. And we've done a lot to get people to know about it. Expo 86 was a huge plus that way, and so people know about Vancouver, but you're absolutely right. You muck it up, and people won't come. Why would they?
Rafe, thanks a lot.
My pleasure, Jim, always.
Our guest has been Rafe Mair, former BC Cabinet Minister and Canada's most successful radio talk show host. You can find him online at rafeonline.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Check out our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. We're also on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Comments about the show can be sent to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.